David, Chattanooga Roots Property Team with an update. I think today we're going to talk a little bit about the buyer-seller dynamic and kind of what's going on in the market. I've realized over the last few videos I need to timestamp things because things change rapidly in this market with all this volatility. So it is June, should have known this for 10th, 9th or 10th, I don't know, June 9th or 10th, 2025. So right now we're in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and there is a shifting market going on. There's a very long time in this market where it was like, well, the sellers still have leverage because of the supply and demand problem. There's not enough houses, so therefore there's not enough supply, and then the demand is still there to a degree with the buyers, even in this poor interest rate environment. Well, the sustained interest rate environment has created a shifting market where the sellers are at best in most price bands are going to be equal with the buyer, and in some price bands the buyers now have the leverage because the supply is stacked up. To give you an idea, 3 years ago, in the height of everything, we had about 600 homes in the entire MLS for Chattanooga. That's the regional MLS, and now we have approaching 3,200. They say 4,000 is a normal balanced market in our market in Chattanooga, but it's already operating as if it's predominantly a shifting into a buyer's market. So it is what it is. What does this mean for sellers? Well, what we're seeing a lot with sellers is they still feel like it's a seller's market. The news hasn't trickled out to them yet that it's shifting. They're kind of figuring it out in real time. And typically the first people to know that it's no longer a seller's market are the buyers. And then the second people to know are the agents. And then the agents have to communicate that to the sellers so the sellers can come to grips with the reality of a shifting market. So what we're seeing right now is a lot of deals aren't making it across the finish line either right out of the gate because sellers still feel like they can be inflexible with their price. And what I would tell sellers right now is if you're getting an offer, you should do everything you can to work with it if it's reasonable. Statistically speaking, the first offer is almost always your best offer because days on market are not your friend. They're never your friend, but they're really not your friend in this market, which is another thing we try to really work with sellers on understanding and fully getting the picture of is, if you overprice in this market and you have to do a price reduction, which is right now, I think 40% of homes in most price bands are experiencing a price reduction. If you do have that price reduction, the statistics say you will go from 14 days on market to 112, and you'll go from getting 98 to 100% of your asking price to getting 92, 90%, so you'll take an 8% loss, and that's just if you have a price cut. That's the averages, not the averages, the median statistic on if you have a price drop, you're more than likely going to wind up with 8 to 10% less than the original list price, and you're going to wind up with a lot more days on market and a lot more stress and headache. And a lot of this can be avoided if sellers would just kind of move down to the uncomfortable end of what they're expecting. It's not always. Sometimes you get homes that are have great differentiators that set themselves apart on many different levels. But for the average, most people, most homes, sellers are having to get really used to the idea of not having all the leverage that they were getting the last few years. And what we're seeing for buyers is buyers are incredibly difficult right now. This isn't commentary on the buyer themselves. It's just kind of the market has produced buyers that are in a very rough rate environment. They have to work really hard to get a house that is even remotely suitable. The payments are generally high. So when they go into the process, they want it to be perfect. They want that listing to stand out above all of the other listings that they're going to look at, and they're going to comparison shop. They're going to look at all your competitors on your street, in your neighborhood. They'll even look a little bit outside of your area if they can find sort of an equivalent lifestyle home dynamic. So they're very particular. So if you're you're going to try to be a little bit ahead of your neighbors who have listed because you think yours is a little better or this, that. Like if you're not clearly better than your competitors, which there are a lot more of in this market, you're probably going to wind up sitting. So we were looking through the data earlier yesterday when I was going to my seller emails, and there were interesting statistics around the number of showings. I have one price band in North Chattanooga where I have a listing. I think there was something on the order of in 39 days, there was an average of 3 showings for 39 days per listing. That was a comp for my listing in North Chattanooga. That's 3 showings in 40 days average. Somebody probably got 5 or 6, somebody got 1, but that is a very low number of showings. And that means you need to be on point out of the gate, because you're not going to get a ton of showings anymore, statistically speaking. And your best weekend is the optimal time to get the best offer. I always say that bread only comes out of the oven fresh once. So that first weekend for sellers, that you have to have the correct price, or as close to it as you can manage. Has to be a product that pictures well, that presents well, and that instantly conveys value. And the buyers, we can't really, the buyers, they're fully taking advantage of this shift in the market, because they got, I don't know if you remember, like 5 minutes ago, they got beat up real bad for 3 to 4 years by sellers. Well, it's not that sellers are going to get beat up, not yet anyway. They're just going to have to really come to grips with the new market. And we're not seeing anybody moving because they want a bigger, closet, or they want a little more yard. These are life events that people are moving in. It is birth, death, divorce, job relocation, additions to the family, things like that. That's what is moving the market. And there's still enough of that sellers' home values haven't went down, but the ability to speed and getting top dollar for sellers is now shifting, right? That's what we're doing. We're shifting the leverages, going from sellers over to the buyers. So it's going to feel very different. We're running into a lot of sellers who bought, say, 2020, 2021, or even 2019, that are like, well, when I bought 3 to 5 years ago, we didn't ask for closing costs. We didn't, we had appraisal gap coverages. We had, we went over asking. And now that they're selling, especially if that was their first home, and now they're selling, trying to find that next home, they're having a real disconnect between what they just experienced a few years ago and the reality of today. So all that to say, it is actually still a decent market if you have to move. You just need to be prepared and really ready for the dynamics that are in the market right now. So if you ever need any help with that, Chattanooga Roots, David, we'd love to give you a hand. Just reach out.